Exercise selection matters less than you think it does once you start doing multiple exercises. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today, but a quick reminder, you guys will please click like down below. It'd be greatly appreciated. If you are not subscribed or following, please do so. And if you will be kind enough to drop me a comment or a like down below, I would also appreciate that. Let's get over to the topic. All right, let's get to the topic at hand. Exercise selection. Yes, if you're only doing one exercise for a muscle group, obviously the exercise matters a whole lot, right? Because that's your only real stimulus. We all agree that this is why when we start discussing true minimalist type training, you have to pick the exercises that work the most muscle for people who are only going to do like 5 exercises a week. Like if you come in and say you're going to train with that level of minimalism, yeah, you don't have a lot of choices. You're not going to gain that much muscle if you're doing a bunch of isolation movements. You're going to gain way more muscle, way more muscle if all 5 of those exercises are a big movement. Okay, right? Like if it's squat, bench, deadlift, chin-ups, weighted dips, whatever. Okay, fine, reasonable because you've worked every muscle in the body to some extent with those movements. So in that context, yes, it matters. Yes, there's going to be different parts of muscles that get worked by different exercises. This is why we need multiple movements. But what I want people to think about when they start talking exercise selection, and this is what the best coaches tell you, it doesn't matter as much as you think it does for hypertrophy, and here's why. Because we're all doing multiple exercises. Look, people will stand there and go on about, well, this puts us into this lengthened position, and we believe based upon this study, lengthened positions are superior. That's limited data. And again, I could make a lot of counter arguments based upon because of the exercises they picked those lengthened positions, right? Or which show it, but no one has ever had trouble gaining muscle with shortened position exercises, right? Tons of them. Think about all the shortened position exercises that are super popular that people still do. Cable flies. Right there, a perfect example. People do it because of the shortened position. Like there would be no reason to ever do a cable fly instead of a dumbbell if lengthened was all that mattered. But people still do it. Some people still feel they get benefits from it. All the hip thrust glute bridges, those are all shortened position exercises, okay? Yeah, people make gains from them. But here's the thing, we will point out, well, look, this exercise has more proximal growth. This one has more distal growth in the muscle. Yeah, that happens. But what happens when you start doing 2 different exercises? Okay. The individual selection matters less. Why? Because different exercises will work different regions of the muscle a little bit different, almost always. Okay, so let's say, we could talk about an incline bench and a flat bench, or a flat bench and a dip. But at the end of the day, you're still adding a second stimulus that works a muscle differently that's going to work regions of the muscle the other one's not working. Yeah, obviously a dip is going to grow the lower chest a little better than an incline. Sure. Absolutely. But at the end of the day, are you still going to get really good chest stimulus because you've done 2 quite different compound movements for the chest? Yes, of course. See where we're going with this? It's going to matter less and less. Now, when we will compare just the incline versus the dip or the bench press, yeah, that matters. Why? Because it's going to focus the upper chest a little more, and the lower chest is going to grow less, sure. But that's because we're only doing a single exercise. What happens when we start doing multiple exercises? All right, we just start getting different regions that all get good stimulus. Okay? Because they tend to work different muscle fibers to some extent, we end up with more well-rounded stimulus no matter what. So that's kind of the point. And so we could make that argument because we are adding a second or a third exercise for a muscle, it's not going to matter as much anymore that they work slightly different regions. It's going to balance out. What's going to matter is maybe does it work other muscles, but I mean the same thing. You do a flat bench versus a fly, a flat bench versus a dip, a flat bench versus an incline. The only difference might be the tricep development. It's going to be the biggest difference because 2 of them are compounds and 1 of them's in isolation. Think your front delts are going to care that much though? They're probably going to get pretty similar. The chest is still going to get a secondary strength curve with slightly different fibers. Okay? And at the end of the day, that's what's going to matter. Same thing we get over to the triceps and stuff. Is it going to matter that much? Once we've worked two different functions of the triceps, do you think you're going to see a dramatic difference? So let's say we're doing something that works the long head a little more plus a press. Do you think there's going to be a dramatic difference once we've added the long head exercise versus the bigger pressing type movement that puts a little more focus on the lateral head? Do you really think there's going to be that much difference? Probably not. Because we've now worked two different regions of the muscle while still working the whole muscle with all the movements, just slight bias. It's not going to matter what we pick so much. In other words, is a rope press down versus a pullover when combined? Let's say you did a bench press or a dip first, right? So let's say you did a bench press followed by a pullover, or you did a weighted dip followed by say a rope press down. Okay, now we've worked two a bit different functions with different biases of the tricep. Do you see where I'm going? Did you train them hard? Did you have progressive overload? Yeah. Is there probably going to be much difference in the tricep development between the two? I mean, I'm not saying there won't be, because there will be biases to certain heads and stuff. But did you train them to a fairly effective volume? Did you work both different exercises and functions hard enough with enough volume with progressive overload and challenging sets that are very close to muscle failure or even to failure, but at least very close to it? The answer is yes, you're going to see really good stimulus. People overthink these things. They really pull this stuff. Well, if I just change this one angle on this isolation, I'm going to get so much better growth. It's like not in the grand scheme of things, not if you're doing multiple exercises. Okay? In other words, if you're doing a dip followed by a press down, do you really think the rope versus the V-bar versus the straight bar is going to have a dramatically different growth response? Maybe if it's the only thing you're doing for the tricep, sure, and you feel one more. But at a certain point, when we start getting to those secondary exercises, as long as they're working a different function of the muscle to any extent from the first one you did, and as long as they're done really hard with challenging work sets and through a reasonable range of motion, you're not going to see that big of differences. We can argue about it. We can talk about optimizing, but the differences are going to be very, very, very small. They may not be enough for you to actually notice, and that's the point. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.